What's up, guys? Before we get on with today's episode, first a disclaimer. This episode was originally recorded Wednesday afternoon, a few hours before the Eric Holla trade took place. This episode was supposed to go live Thursday morning, but obviously certain things take priority, so I had to push this episode back to Friday morning. The disclaimer is that some of the information in this episode might be outdated, so if I at any point discuss about the cap space situation and say that it is $12 million. Obviously, that's been updated after the Eric Holla trade. Just minuscule things. I didn't want to scrap the episode because I brought up a lot of interesting talking points, and I really do want the Devils to learn from the Oilers and the Panthers. And without further ado, let's get on with today's episode. This is Locked On Devils. The Panthers, in the words of Drake, went back to back. I know there's some irony to that because Drake is Canadian, and the last time a Canadian-based team won the Stanley Cup, you would have to go back to 1993. But what lessons can we learn from both the Panthers and the Oilers and apply it to the Devils? There's a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast. Here at the Locked On Network, I'm your host, Kyle Chalky play announcer, Devils where I pucks pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. And with that, the 2024-2025 NHL season is officially over. Congratulations to the Florida Panthers, back-to-back champions. While I have the chance, I want to play a clip that I recorded on June 4th. Roll it back. Here's my prediction. I got the Panthers repeating as champions. I have them beating the Oilers in 6. It's fitting that today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel because I get to say this. FanDuel, run me my money. I said Panthers in 6. Congratulations to Paul Maurice and the entire Panthers staff. They did one hell of a job dominating the Oilers and making the series not so competitive as it waned on. Now, how is this going to relate to the New Jersey Devils? Because as you guys know, I talk about the Devils all day, every day over here at Locked On Devils. Well, let's do something interesting. There's no such thing as losses, just lessons. And how can the Devils learn from both the Oilers and the Panthers to better their team and make sure that they don't make the same mistakes? So in the first segment, we will look at some of the mistakes that the Oilers made and relate it to the Devils. Then in the second segment, we'll take some lessons from the Panthers so that way the Devils can someday be a competitive team and win the Stanley Cup. They were a playoff team, but they were handled in 5 by the Hurricanes. Let's get right into it. The Oilers losing in 6 to the Panthers. I think it's safe to say that last year's Stanley Cup Final was a lot more competitive because the Oilers were down 3-0. They exonerated that deficit. They forced it to Game 7. It was an intense battle. You saw the now popular clip of Connor McDavid yelling at his team to dig the F in. Not good enough. Let's try to get one win at home. Man, that final was so entertaining. But Game 6, the closing game, the Oilers, you just knew they were not going to win when they went down big early. McDavid said it post-game that the Oilers were trying to run the same thing over and over and over again, but it just didn't work. They didn't adapt well. And I want the Devils to take that as a lesson. You can't roll with the same group and expect a different outcome. I think that's what they did this past season. I was really hoping that Fitzgerald would land somebody decent at the deadline. Obviously, that didn't work out. Fitzgerald was quoted to say that he's going to try to change up the roster. I've talked about it ad nauseum on this show. He said it wasn't good enough. So at least the Devils aren't going to make the same mistake that the Oilers made, which is try to run it back and repeat the same thing you did last year or the game before and hope for a different outcome. Just didn't work. I think Sheldon Keefe is the right man for the job. We'll see what happens. Wayne Gretzky said this after Game 6. You can't rely on one or two players to carry your team. I think it's safe to say that Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, they were shut down in this series. As the series went on, McDavid, he was less and less of a factor, which was very impressive from the Panthers that they were able to game plan against McDavid. Because remember, McDavid last season won the Conn Smythe Trophy, despite being on the losing team. This time around, the Panthers made sure that would not happen again. I will cut the Oilers a little bit of slack because Zach Hyman did not appear at all during the finals just due to injury. I know he didn't exactly have the same 50-goal productive season that he had last year, but that's still a decent-sized piece that you're missing, and I'm sure he would have loved to compete in something like this. I think he definitely could have been an X factor, or he could have been a big-time contributor. That was a big hole that, unfortunately, the Oilers weren't able to fill. Draisaitl, finalist for the Hart Trophy. To his credit, he did score the game-winning goal in overtime in Game 4 to tie the series, but Games 5 and 6, just not good enough, and I think Draisaitl will admit that. This ties back to the Devils because I talked to Chico Resch about it, which is everyone wants a quick fix. Everyone thinks that there's going to be one player, there's going to be one saving grace for the Devils this offseason. I don't think that's entirely true. It's going to take a collective team effort. I see the debate on social media. We're going to talk about this in the second segment a little bit more. Scoring, physicality, defense, give Luke Hughes a bridge deal, long-term deal. Look, it's going to take a whole team for the Devils to be successful and take giant leaps forward. There's no one quick fix. It's going to take a few trades, might take a signing here or there for the Devils to really get the ball rolling. So when people ask me, like, who should the Devils sign? Who should the Devils get in the trade market? I always say, I got to look at who's available, and you got to think of everything as an investment. Does it make sense? Can you afford this player? Because I'm sure a lot of people want to swing for the fences, but just given the cap available for the Devils, that's easier said than done. Now, I want the Devils to become players come July 1st. But I also want them to capitalize on the window that they currently have. I've talked about it with Mike Moriel of NHL.com. Look at Connor McDavid, for example. McDavid originally signed an 8-year, $100 million contract a few years ago. You know how much time is remaining on his contract? He has one more season remaining. He will become a UFA in 2026. Theoretically, he could sign an extension on July 1st. He's eligible to do so. But I think McDavid is going to take his sweet time and really assess everything. Like, do I really want to return to the Oilers? That's 2 straight Stanley Cup Final appearances and 2 straight losses. Is there something else out there where I can win a Stanley Cup? Because McDavid is chasing after something greater, because he's often regarded as one of the best players in this generation. And come the end of his career, we might be talking about being one of the greatest ever to play. Not surpassing Wayne Gretzky. Don't even start that. I'm not even saying Sidney Crosby. Just putting that out there. Remember what I said about Nico Hischier? He has 2 years remaining on his contract, and I don't anticipate for Hischier to leave, but a lot can happen in 2 years. If the Devils don't continue to improve, maybe Nico will say to himself, like, maybe the grass is greener somewhere else. Are the Devils really serious about competing? That's why I say that the Devils really need to do whatever it takes to show Nico, to show other players, like, they're serious about possibly winning a Stanley Cup in the near future. Now, obviously, these things take time because it took Alexander Barkov many years to win a Stanley Cup with the Panthers. It took Nathan McKinnon many years to win a Stanley Cup with the Avalanche. It took Alex Ovechkin many years to win a Stanley Cup with the Capitals. But I'm sure Hischier, still being relatively young, he's going to consider everything. But I really hope Fitzy is keeping a watchful eye on that, because I don't want there to be a situation where Hischier is even contemplating leaving the Devils. Because will McDavid leave the Oilers? We don't really know, but he might take his sweet time. And if he doesn't have an extension come mid-season, and if he hasn't really committed to the Oilers, that can make things very interesting. Take that however you want to take that. Overall, the goaltending just wasn't up to par for the Oilers. Like Stuart Skinner, he just ain't it. That's 2 years in a row. He's just not the person in net to help you win a Stanley Cup. Calvin Pickard, he tried his best. Still not the best option. How does this affect the Devils? Maybe the Oilers are going to go after Jake Allen, because the market for goaltenders is kind of spread thin. And Jake Allen had a really good performance with the Devils this past season. Remember, the Canadians retained half of his salary because they were that desperate to get rid of him, but Allen proved that he's still very useful. Allen is one of, if not the best option when it comes to goalies in the market. So maybe the Oilers are going to go after him and just say, like, look, we'll sign you to a bigger deal, because Allen is projected to get a bit of a pay increase this offseason. I know he talked about wanting to return, but the Oilers might offer him a contract that he might not be able to refuse. You never know. Because you know how hard it was for the Devils to get Jacob Markstrom? I'm sure a team like the Oilers might take note of that. So my main lessons for the Devils from the Oilers, it's not just going to take one person. It's going to take a collective team. You can't do the same thing over and over again and expect for a different outcome. And you got to keep your main players happy, and you got to capitalize on your window. Otherwise, it can come back to bite you. So those are the main takeaways that I want the Devils to learn from the Oilers. Now, we're going to talk about the Stanley Cup champion Panthers momentarily. They are the blueprint in the NHL. But before we continue, like I said earlier, this show is sponsored by FanDuel. Run me my money. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. When this episode goes live, the Pacers are set to play against the Thunder. It's a win-or-go-home matchup. Maybe the Thunder will become champions in the NBA. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook betting partner of the NBA. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. All right, let's talk about the Stanley Cup champion Panthers. As I am recording this episode, the Panthers are currently at Elbow Room in Fort Lauderdale, partying it up, and I just got to share this. Elbow Room, one of my favorite spots to go to during spring break, along with Rock Bar. Man, that whole sidewalk, that whole pier out in Fort Lauderdale, it's a party capital, and I'm sure they're having a great time. So many great memories during spring break. But getting back to hockey, what lessons can the Devils learn from the Panthers? Well, first and foremost, like I said, it's going to take a collective team effort. And I think just up and down the Panthers lineup, they were very consistent, and they had weapons that they could turn to at any given moment. Look at the Conn Smythe Trophy. There were like 5 different players that could have won it. It ended up becoming Sam Bennett, who showed out during the playoffs. He's going to get paid big time. You could have made a case for Brad Marchand, who scored 6 goals throughout the final. You could have had Sam Reinhart. He scored 4 goals in the clinching game. Sergei Bobrovsky was on one. There were so many different options you could turn to for the Panthers. And I think that's what makes them so dangerous, is because, once again, it goes back to not only do you got your main guys, but you have some depth assets to go to as well. That's why I picked for them to repeat as champions. So that's what I want the Devils to learn from the Panthers, which is, going back to what I said in the first segment, it's a team effort. It doesn't matter about individual players. Like, come the playoffs, you can't just rely on Jack Hughes or Jesper Bratt to do a boatload of your scoring. It has to come throughout your entire lineup. Let's go back to the 2023 playoffs in the first round. Who did the Devils rely on when it came to scoring? Andre Palat elevated his game. Eric Haula elevated his game. You had an unlikely hero in Akira Schmid. It's ironic now we're talking about getting rid of Palat and Haula, but you get the gist of it. I also want the Devils to swing big time. No excuses. And I'm going to make this a point of emphasis, because look at what the Panthers did throughout the course of the season. They added Brad Marchand to their roster. They added Seth Jones to their roster. I think Jones had a really good showing during the playoffs. He showed why he didn't belong in Chicago, why his talent was being wasted out there. I think he was one of the unsung heroes during the finals. That's my personal opinion. But what did the front office, what did they do? They added more to their already stacked roster. And this is what I want the Devils to do. It starts with getting rid of one of those big contracts on the board. You got to get rid of Andre Palat. Maybe Eric Haula, maybe Dawson Mercer. Dougie Hamilton is my dark horse. I talked about it in the previous episode. I'm indifferent about it. I don't think Dougie is as bad as people are portraying him to be, but I can see how his contract can help financially. But the Devils aren't going to be in the running for Mitch Marner. They're not going to be in the running for Sam Bennett. They're not going to be in the running for Brad Marchand, because as I am recording this episode, they only have $12 million in available cap space. Luke Hughes still needs an extension. Tom Fitzgerald really has to get on his horse here, because if the Rangers were able to figure it out and shed so many contracts off the boards like Jacob Trouba, Chris Kreider, Capo Caco, there's no excuse why the Devils can't do the same thing. They got to figure something out. Swing for the fences, because let's go back to 2021. Matthew Tkachuk, he won it out of Calgary. Who did the Panthers part ways with in order to get Tkachuk? It wasn't a one-for-one type of deal, but the main centerpiece, I would say, was Justin Huberdeau. So that's what I want the Devils to do. I've talked about it so many times. Is it scoring or is it physicality? Because I saw the debate on social media after the Panthers won yet again. I got involved in it. I can't play victim here, but let's listen into what Jake Allen had to say when I asked him, what's it going to take for the Devils to become champions? Here's what he had to tell me.
Do you see any similarities from that championship run to maybe what the Devils could potentially do in the future?
I mean, every team's different. You're never going to have the same group of guys every year, especially that group in St. Louis. We had a special group, but I think the thing that we had there was just four lines that were rolling, and I thought that's when we were at our best this year. When we had all four going, that's when we were at our best, and I think that's what championship teams need, and that's where we'll probably have to get to here.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. Everything goes hand in hand with one another, because you need good scoring, you need physicality, you need good blue liners, and you need good goaltending. That's what makes a champion. You can't just have one or the other, because the Oilers are a good example of having better individual players, but their depth just wasn't there. Their defense wasn't there. Look at Evan Bouchard, for example. I don't mean to single him out, but he was a turnover machine during the elimination game. Or Stewart and Pickard, not a good goaltending tandem. You see what I mean? But when you look at the Panthers, up and down their lineup, I just said 5 different players could have won the Conn Smythe. You can make a legitimate argument for a lot of different players. Sergei Bobrovsky was good. They had the physicality. You had people like Sasha Barkov and Matthew Tkachuk playing through major injuries, and whether or not that impacts their season come next year, I don't really know. And honestly, I don't even think they care. They got the cup in the end. Hopefully it's not like a Gabriel Landeskog situation where you miss like a few years, but digressing a little bit, I really hope Fitzgerald figures it out, because this will determine what the Devils are come next season. I know I talked about how they'll have more cap space come next offseason, but I really want to see what they do this offseason. Obviously, the biggest domino piece is Luke Hughes and his new deal. What will that look like? How will that impact the Devils going forward? The draft is right around the corner. Maybe the Devils will unload a big contract by then, so that way they can free up some cap space. I talked about it in the previous episode. The Devils traded away John Marino for a second-round pick because a few days later, they were able to sign Brett Pesce. They already had that in the works. So I think that's what the Devils could learn from the Panthers, which is swing for the fences. If there's a big name player available and you think that player can really be a difference maker for your team, go for it, but be smart about it. I just got to say that. Up and down your lineup, it's going to take a collective team effort. It's going to take scoring. It's going to take physicality. It's going to take depth. It's going to take defense. It's going to take goaltending. I think the Devils' defense is pretty solid. I think their goaltending is pretty good as well. Even if Jake Allen doesn't return, you still got Nico Dawes. Their scoring, I'd say it's pretty good as well. Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, Jack Hughes. Their depth, a little bit of a problem. I don't think the Devils are as soft as people are making them out to be, because when you look at the hits per game, I get that's just one metric, but still, it's an important metric. The Devils were 10th in the NHL this season when it came to hits per game. Number one were the Panthers, and you know who is a bottom-tier team? The Oilers. They didn't hit that many people. They weren't as physical, and that showed during the final. So that's where I stand, and I think that's what the Devils could learn from the Panthers. Collective team effort, go for it, and you got to get unique. You got to get moving if you're Fitzy. So congratulations to the Panthers. Congratulations to former Devils players Vitek Vanecek, Tomas Nosek, AJ Greer, Jesper Boquist, Dmitry Kulikov. You could throw Evan Cormier in the mix as well, even though he was just being used as like sort of a practice goalie, a third-string goalie, if you would. But doesn't matter. Still a champion, and lots of former Devils in Sunrise. All right, to close out today's episode, let me give you guys my thoughts on the Stanley Cup Final in general and the legacy of the Panthers. I saw this debate on social media. Are the Panthers a dynasty? Well, if you don't consider them one already, they're very close. I mean, I guess the debate you can spark is, were the Lightning a dynasty? Because they went to 3 straight Stanley Cup Final, back-to-back champions, and they had a lot of great talent on the roster, and Nikita Kucherov, Steven Stamkos, Victor Hedman, Braden Point, Andre Vasilevsky. I could go on. I think that's definitely another team that was the blueprint for many years in the NHL. And also you had Andre Palat on the roster, if you just want to factor that in. But the Panthers got something special brewing, and honestly, they could run it back with the same team. I know they're talking about maybe extending Bennett. You know, Marchand is getting up there in age, and I know he played really well during the playoffs. AFP Analytics is predicting for his value to go down a little bit. I don't know why. He performed really well, but could he get a new contract from the Panthers? They admit he's going to have to take a huge pay cut in order for it to work. But, hey, you got a dynasty forming right there. Marchand is latter half of his career, maybe wants to rack up as many Stanley Cups as he possibly can. You never know. Paul Maurice is obviously still behind the bench. Matthew Tkachuk is still there. Sasha Barkov is still there. Basically, you still got the foundation of the Panthers, and why not? Why can't they run it back? That's my question for you. I mean, I'm sure they'll pitch that to everyone who's a pending UFA. You don't really know. But I must say that the Stanley Cup Final and its ending was a little disappointing, because I said this in the first segment. You just knew that the Oilers weren't going to come back and win. That's the most disappointing thing when they went down early, because it's just like the first few games were very competitive, I would say. Like you had the Oilers winning game 1, then you had the Panthers winning game 2 in double overtime, thanks to Brad Marchand once again. Then after game 4, the Oilers tied it up, but the Panthers regained the momentum, winning 2 straight games. So they won in Edmonton once again, and then they closed it out on their home ice. So despite having home ice advantage, the Oilers couldn't capitalize on it. So it was like in store for a competitive 7-game series, very close, but the advanced analytics show it, the bulk stats show it, even the times led in this series, like the Oilers got dominated. Just no ands or buts about it. For Connor McDavid, that might taint his legacy a little bit, because I'm already seeing some people on social media saying he will never be better than Sidney Crosby, and forget about Wayne Gretzky. So we'll have to wait and see, but could that be the end for the Oilers? Could Connor McDavid consider leaving and saying, like, maybe there's a better opportunity for me to win a cup? Hey, I think someday McDavid will hoist a cup, but will it be with the Oilers? Only time will tell. Obviously, there's still a lot of question marks. A lot can still happen, but all in all, the team who I thought was going to win did it in the same amount of games I predicted, 6. Let me know your thoughts. What lessons did you learn from both the Oilers and the Panthers, and how can you apply it to the Devils? And what are your thoughts on the Stanley Cup Final in general? Were you entertained? Were you disappointed? Did you expect more? Did you expect less? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Make sure to follow me over at X at TreyMatt4, or the show's X page app at Locked On Devils. Thanks for listening. Once again, we are now in the 2025 offseason officially. No more NHL games on the docket.